judges ready? And the timer? Okay, in this speech I will be going over first the arguments which Zach brought up in his speech, and then I will be redoing the arguments which Drew brought up in his speech, which Zach actually dropped. First of all, Zach read a quote at the beginning of the speech saying that the time to act is now, and I agree that it is good to act about things as soon as you can. However, just because the time to act may be now does not mean that we should just lose our heads and just run away and do something without thinking about it. Because doing policies which may not be very smart just because the time to act is now will actually have long-term bad things happening to it. And Zach said in his speech that we are saying that if Russia does anything, it's wrong. Well, we do not have fiat power over Russia, and the resolution is that the United States federal government should significantly reform its policy towards Russia. And under this resolution, the affirmative team has fiat power over the United States federal government. They do not have fiat power over Russia, so they cannot fiat Russia to say, okay, we will do this. That is not within the bounds of the resolution. And also, it is okay if they include Russia in their plan, but Russia cannot act. There is a big difference between including somebody or some country in something and saying you can act about this. For example, some examples of topical cases would be to end programs toward Russia. That would be including Russia. However, Russia would not be acting as we take away that program for Russia. Now, Zach also said in his speech that Russia includes people and not only the government. However, foreign policy does not work this way. As country to country, as government from government, we do not work toward people or people groups in Russia. It would be kind of stupid to say that the United States federal government should significantly reform their policy toward the Smith family living in Moscow, Russia. No, the point of the resolution is to go towards Russia, the Russian government, not the Russian people or Russian investors or Russian people groups like that. So therefore, under that, they would not be topical. Also, under his advocacy point, he said that he was basically doing the same thing which Congress does, is basically they plan over what they're going to do and then they go ahead and do it. However, this could be an idea that they thought of themselves. We don't know if this is all that smart of an idea because they do not quote any PhDs or any really smart advocates saying, okay, we should do this plan and all of the subpoints underneath the plan. This seems like just all these different ideas meshed together into a plan. And also, this would mean that there would be less evidence for us as a negative team to use because there would be no people out there saying we should not do this plan because nobody has recommended the plan. Then the really smart PhDs would not find the need to say we should not do this plan. So this is one of the reasons which we do not have very much evidence in our last speech. And also on the evidence point, he said that we lacked evidence. Well, this comes from the NCSEA Debate Ethics and Evidence Guidelines, and they actually define evidence. Here's how they define evidence. They say, according to the American Heritage Dictionary, evidence is defined as the data on which a judgment or conclusion may be based, something that furnishes proof. It does not say you have to quote a wonderful PhD just to use evidence. If we use logic or maxims, those are all types of evidence. Under this definition, we can do a judgment or conclusion with furnished proof. That would be evidence. And also, he said that we are not posing attacks on anyone but Russia. This is underneath our disadvantage. Therefore, that the other countries in the world would not be mad because we are not posing attacks on them. However, this would send a really bad message to the world, because here is essentially what we are doing. Russian investors have already invested in the U.S. economy, and what we are doing is, after they have invested, we're taxing them on their investments, which is very not fair, and it's extremely unpredictable, and other Russian investors will learn from this, and they will say, the U.S. is really unpredictable, and they treated my friend, this investor, really badly in this way, so they could also treat me badly in that way, so I don't want to go and invest my money in the U.S. economy. And this would also send a bad message to the rest of the world, because the rest of the world would see that the U.S. was treating Russia this way, and this sends a horrible message. It gives the U.S. as a nation a really bad reputation to be doing this to the investors. Yeah, that would be being extremely unpredictable. And also, under the status quo, under their plan, it would be actually treating Russia as a child state, saying, Russia, here's a great idea, let's do this, it's okay. It's kind of like treating Russia like we can go tie their shoes, or make their breakfast, or pick out their outfits of what to wear in the morning. Russia's not like that. People want to be treated like they're their age. I'm the youngest in the family of 8 kids, and I have a sister. She was 18 when I was born, and some of my other sisters like her around that age that were already teenagers when I was born. Sometimes I feel like they still think that I'm a little kid, like 3 years old, because when they went off to college, I was 3 years old, so then naturally, right now, I would still be 3 years old. I do not like being treated as a 3-year-old because I am no longer 3 years old. I am 13 years old, so I should not be treated like I'm 3 years old. And I do not like being treated like a child, and nobody wants to be treated like a child, not even countries, not even Russia. Here's a quote from Ariel Cohen. He said in 2006, quote, "The goal of the United Russia and its president is to make Russia once again an autonomous international player by returning to the values that made it strong in the past. If United Russia is successful, the U.S. and other Western powers must engage Russia on an entirely new level as a competitor, not as a junior partner." Now, in the rest of my speech, I will be going over the arguments which my partner actually brought up in his speech and reiterating these points. First of all, under topicality, under their first mandate, it relies on Russian action. I do not have their plan up here with me now, but it does rely on Russian action. It's having Russia and the U.S. work together and sign this treaty on the U.S. cluster bombs. We do not have fiat power over Russia. How could we make Russia sign this treaty? Well, Zach said, well, you know what? We have enforcement, and our enforcement is a 30% tax. Well, that actually leads to a big disadvantage, because this is really hurting our relations toward Russia, because all of the investors who are putting their investment in the United States are now essentially being cheated of their money, because it's kind of like we took their investments while they were giving them in, and then we taxed them, and we said, haha, looky here, we just taxed you. And they're all really mad about that, and it will send a really bad message to the rest of the world. And also, we will lose other Russian investors because they don't like it that we are treating their friends investors like this, and so they will fear that we might treat them like this in the future, and it sends a really bad record of being unpredictable. Thank you, and I'm ready for questions.
Okay, great. Hey, Katie. I want to start off with your topicality. I have a couple questions. Do you agree that enforcement doesn't need to be topical, or did you address that?
I did not address that, but it should be topical.
It should be topical.
Yeah, it should be toward the Russian.
Now, do you also agree the wording of the resolution doesn't necessarily specify the Russian government, it says Russia?
That is true, but foreign policy does not work that way. Foreign policy is between government to government and country to country, not the USSG toward Russian civilians and people.
Okay, sure. Now, did you provide an impact for your advocacy argument? Because Drew didn't bring one up. I was just wondering if you did.
Well, I did say that it would be hard for us to find evidence because there would be no one out there to say, do not do this.
Okay, now I found your NCFCA definition of evidence interesting. Was it basically saying that evidence is something that's considered, looked at, and then a conclusion is drawn from?
Well, here was the definition. I can read it.
If you can just read it really quick, yeah.
The data on which a judgment or conclusion may be based, something that furnishes proof.
Okay, something that furnishes. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Now, I want to talk about predictability for a little bit.
Okay.
If Drew punched me, that would be unpredictable. But if we told Russia that if we give them a treaty and we tell them that if they don't sign it, we're going to implement the enforcement, would you call that predictable enough, or would we have to do something else?
Well, the whole point is that the Russian investors have already invested in us, and we're being unpredictable by suddenly taxing them, which we did not tell them before they invested.
Sorry, hold on right there for a second.
Okay.
You said we're going to suddenly tax them. Now, what you define now would suddenly be putting it in a treaty and submitting the treaty to Russia.
What I'm saying is that they have already invested their money in us, and then we are turning around and taxing them, which could mean suddenly, because since they already invested, it would be a big, unpredictable, really surprise.
Okay, now what type of warning, just, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but what type of warning should we give to Russia in order to make it predictable enough?
I don't know, but we should think before we just go ahead and do plans.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
I don't need to press on.